Well, we're continuing in our sermon series, Carols for the King, and what that is about, what we've been talking about for the last few weeks. Actually, I'll get to what we're talking about the last few weeks. I want to make a correction from the sermon last week. I made an offhand comment during the sermon last week about the timing of Jesus' coming, and the comment still rings true, and we'll get to that in a second, but I made a comment about, we're not even sure that there was any people on North and South America during the time of Jesus' birth. That was not true. That is, I had somebody say to me, hey, did you know? And they shared some stuff with me. I'm like, I wasn't aware of that. I was basing that comment off of something that is now shockingly almost 100 years old. But if any of you have ever read the book Kon-Tiki by Thor Heyerdahl, ever read that book? It's interesting. I think they have a movie adaptation of it too. Very interesting. But he talks about kind of the spread. He was a zoologist and worked with kind of human migration patterns, and he had theories about how that happened. I was basing that comment off of that. His work is 100 years old now almost. So the correction from last week is there's recent findings that show that Native people have existed in what is now North America, all across it, since at least 1000 BC, and in South and Central America for even longer than that. So the comment I made that I don't even know that there was, we don't know if there's Native people here. There was Native people, but the point of that was still stands. The comment was that the timing and location of Jesus' coming allowed for the gospel to spread further and faster than it could have any time before it in human history. That still stands, regardless of whether that included, this hemisphere, because it didn't at the time. So correction. And by the way, I'm making that correction because I said something that wasn't true. And it was misinformation. I had wrong information. I would rather say, hey, I got that wrong, and correct that, than just say, just don't bring it up, and then nobody will notice. It doesn't matter. I'd rather be accurate and say that I'm wrong than be inaccurate and just plow ahead and try to make everybody think I'm right all the time. I'm not right all the time. I make mistakes. So why are we doing this sermon series on Carols for the King? Music is a means of passing on important truths. In fact, it is one of the most powerful mnemonic tools that we have. Mnemonic means memory-related tools. And we're looking at the biblical truths on display in some of our favorite Christmas carols. And all of these carols that we're looking at are a declaration in one way or another of the truth of the gospel. And we are actually I had another song in mind for today, and throughout the course of the last couple of weeks, God is just keeps bringing one song in front of me that I didn't know a whole lot about. I knew a little bit about the backstory behind it, but not a ton. And I heard it 3 times in a day. After God had somebody else had kind of brought it to my attention. I heard it 3 times in one day, and I'm like, Lord, is this really, you want us to talk about this, don't you? So I scrapped the song I was originally going to do today, which was God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, which actually we don't know a ton about. And we're instead going to look at the song, I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day. Some of you might know the story behind this song. Some of you might not. And we are going to close the service today singing this song. So we're going to pray, and we're going to dive in to God's word for us today, which is going to include a lot of history, but also the message of that song that is rooted deeply in Scripture. And also, honestly, the confusion that we sometimes have, both as Christians and especially the world, about what Christmas is really about. So we're going to pray and dive into this today. Heavenly Father, I feel like Charlie Brown right now. Show us what Christmas is all about. Show us this morning the real message behind what we celebrate this time of year. Open your word to us. Open your work in history. Open your work in the lives of your people. And show us your truth. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. So, the story behind this song is quite extensive. The song was actually originally written by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in 1863. You might recognize the name Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. He was one of the most well-known poets and prolific writers of his day. It was common practice in the late 1800s through, honestly, the 1970s, 80s. I don't know if any of you guys had this, where we often memorize poems and works of his. It was written in 1863 in Boston. And if you know anything about U.S. history, what was happening in 1863 in the United States? The Civil War. Longfellow was a staunch pacifist and an abolitionist. He was very outspoken against violence and aggression. He often said that violence just begets violence, and you're not going to solve the problems of the hearts of men with swords and guns. And he was an abolitionist, which means that he fought from the very earliest days to try to abolish slavery in this country. And he was very outspoken about that. In July of 1861, Longfellow's wife, Fanny, her dress caught on fire. He was taking a nap in the next room and heard her start screaming, was woken from his sleep, got up and tried to put the flames out unsuccessfully, and even used his own body to try to save his wife. And she died the next day. He was so badly burned that he was not able to attend her own funeral, his wife's funeral. He was still recovering in the hospital. He couldn't move. In fact, if you ever see a picture of Longfellow, he always has this you see pictures of him, he's got this big beard. He actually never had a beard before that. He always was very clean-shaven. But he was so disfigured from the burns that he grew the beard to cover that disfigurement. You might be like, wow, Merry Christmas. This is not a fun story so far. He stopped shaving on account of the burns. As the Civil War raged on, Longfellow was outspoken against slavery, but also against war as a means of stopping it. And him and his wife had 6 children together, one of which had died in infancy. And his children were very all aware of his views. But his oldest son, Charles, snuck off to join the fighting against his father's wishes. He left in the middle of the night so his father wouldn't try to stop him. And actually, he got sick when he first got to camp, something called camp sickness, which might have been something akin to malaria, and was actually sent back home before he ever saw battle. And then he recovered, and he left again. And on December 1st of 1863, Henry received a telegram that his son had been severely wounded. In fact, the original report said that your son has been shot 4 times in the face. And he and his next oldest son left immediately from Boston to go to Washington, D.C. to try to find where he was told his son would be. And on December 5th, after taking a train to Washington, D.C., he actually, this is a scene out of a movie, but this is how it's reported that it happened. He was waiting on the platform while an army train pulled in and started unloading the wounded and the dead, and he would look through every cot until he found his son. And he did, alive. His son was severely wounded. The original report of him being shot in the face was incorrect. That was actually the guy next to him who did die and was a good friend of his son Charlie's. Instead, his son Charlie wound up with a wound inches from his spine, and every surgeon they talked to said he will probably never walk again. So, Longfellow used his connections and got his son released from service and brought him home. And you might be like, this is not a Christmas story. This is not a good story. After traveling back home to Boston on December 25th, on Christmas Day of 1863, Longfellow, along with his family, were going to church. Longfellow was a devout Christian, which is why he was an abolitionist and a pacifist. And when they got home from church that day, he penned the words to the poem, "I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day," which about 3 years later was set to music, and by 1891 was a commonly printed in most hymnals in the United States. 1865, he wrote the poem seeking to capture the dynamic and dissonance in his own heart and the world he observed around him. As he heard bells chiming on Christmas Day, celebrating the birth of the Savior and the message of Christmas, which is peace on earth and goodwill towards men. And he said, there's something wrong here. This doesn't make sense. So we're going to look at the lyrics to that song and the meaning behind it, and the biblical significance that song brings forward. The first stanza says this: "I heard the bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play, and wild and sweet the words repeat of peace on earth, goodwill to men." So he heard these bells, and he's like, oh, those bells, they're declaring that we should be celebrating because Jesus has come. And the message of the gospel is peace on earth and goodwill to men. The next stanza, and thought how as the day had come, the belfries of all Christendom had rolled along the unbroken song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. That throughout history, this message continues to be relayed, kind of regardless, across all of places where there's a Christian witness, regardless of the circumstances going on around them. The third stanza, and we're going to get into the meaning behind all this in a minute. "Till ringing, singing on its way, the world revolved from night to day. A voice, a chime, a chant sublime of peace on earth, goodwill to men." And this fourth stanza is the one we're going to really focus on right now. "And in despair I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said. For hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to men." I always remember as a kid when I would hear this song, I would think, that's a weird song. Why is he saying, like, I bowed my head, I'm like depressed because there's no peace? I never understood that until you learn the story behind the song. So what does the song mean? Well, Longfellow is reflecting on how the message of Christmas is wrapped up in the angel's announcement to the shepherds. That unto us is born this day in the city of David a Savior who is Christ the Lord. That is the message of Christmas. And then the angels cry out, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace and goodwill toward men." That's the King James. That was the translation he used, because that was really one of the main ones available during that time. That's how the King James translates Luke 2:14, the proclamation of the angels. "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men." Thus, the end of each line of this poem, of this song, ends with that declaration: peace on earth, goodwill to men. When he hears these bells, he's like, it's like the angels singing, much like the song we talked about last week. It's like the angels proclaiming this message: peace on earth, goodwill to men. Every year, Christians proclaim this message of peace and goodwill. Every year. When we celebrate Christmas, this is the message that we proclaim. As we tell the story of the birth of Jesus, we proclaim with the angels peace on earth and goodwill towards men. And Longfellow is saying, throughout all of history, no matter where you go, if there's a Christian witness, this message keeps getting proclaimed. Every year around Christmas, we proclaim this truth that Jesus' coming brings peace on earth and goodwill to men. And yet, Longfellow, who had lost his wife, had earlier lost one of his children in infancy, and now had almost lost his son to war, as he saw his country tear itself apart, said, "This doesn't make sense. How are we proclaiming peace and goodwill towards men? There is no peace. There is no goodwill. Look at how we treat each other. Look at what we do." There's some disconnection between this message and the world around us. This is why this song instantly became part of our hymns, became part of the songs that we sing at Christmas, because we relate to this truth. The declaration of the angels was there would be peace on earth and goodwill towards men. And when we look around, we do not have peace. We do not have goodwill towards one another. This song was written almost 160 years ago. And yes, at the time, we were at war. We still are. There is still this disconnection. Look at the world around us. It's not a world of peace. It's not a world of goodwill. And it would be easy in that moment to say, thus, the message of the angels was wrong. They got it wrong. They got it wrong. Why are we celebrating in the midst of turmoil? There's nothing to celebrate. There's no peace. There's no goodwill. The world is broken. And Jesus' birth didn't fix the fact that the world is broken. It didn't suddenly magically change everybody to be good people and treat each other well. It didn't cease war, strife, and conflict. It didn't change the human heart. That disconnect, that dissonance that Longfellow felt, I think is something that we can all relate to. Which is why this song still resonates. The world is full of strife and turmoil. Human sin and hate mocks the message of the angels. That's the way that Longfellow said it. He said, "And in despair I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth," I said, "for hate is strong," and it mocks the song. Makes fun of the song. Oh, peace on earth, goodwill to men. No, there's no peace. The hate and sin of humanity shows differently. And this song would not be in any hymnal. It would not have resonated with people so much if that was the end of the song. But it's not. It's not the end of the song. In fact, the gospel message is most clearly demonstrated in the last stanza of this song. "Then pealed the bells more loud and deep. God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail, with peace on earth, goodwill to men." What Longfellow was seeing, what we often see, is the failure in humanity. The last stanza here, though, summarizes the gospel. Peace and goodwill cannot be based on human endeavors. I kind of said this when I was praying, but I meant it. How many of you have ever seen the Charlie Brown Christmas special? Right? Charlie Brown Christmas special. Love Charlie Brown Christmas special. Grew up with it. I think we're going to see a little clip of part of that on Sunday or on Friday. And if you remember in that Christmas special, Charlie Brown is wanting to have a great Christmas, trying to put on a Christmas pageant, doing all this Christmassy stuff. He wants a cool Christmas tree, and nothing is working out. Classic Charlie Brown's fashion. And in his frustration, he cries out and he says, "Can somebody just tell me what Christmas is all about?" And his friend Linus, the theologian of the group, if you ever read the comic strips, he is the theologian. He's got a Charles Schultz, who came to know Christ later after he started writing the comic strip, actually, often would put little spiritual truth in the comic strips. One of my favorite ones is Linus and Sally, Charlie Brown's little sister, they're sitting around and the 12 Days of Christmas comes on. And she's like, "Oh, if I hear this song one more time, I'm gonna just go crazy." And he says, "Actually, did you know the reference to the calling birds is actually a reference to," and he quotes 2 Samuel 7, "And I cried out like a calling bird on the mountain, where does my help come from? It comes from the Lord." And he just this deep theological insight. And she's like, "Huh, and if I get socks, I'm going to just go nuts." I feel like that most of the time. I'll say something like, "Did you know this?" And everyone else around me is like, "Yeah, we don't care." Anyway, let's move on. Well, that's who he is. That's who Linus is in there. And actually, in one of the great moments in cartoon history, in that scene when Charlie Brown says, "Can somebody tell me what Christmas is all about?" you'll see Linus on the stage. He goes, "I can tell you what Christmas is all about." And he starts reading Luke chapter 2, verbatim. And when he gets done reading, and I'm going to read that to us right now. He reads Luke chapter 2. And he says, "This is what Christmas is all about." I should have had this marked ahead of time. I apologize. Gives you time to get there, too. He says, "In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to his own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for her baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn." And this is actually, verse 8 is actually where Linus picks up. "And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, 'Do not be afraid.'" And if you ever watch the Christmas special, by the way, what does Linus always have with him? His security blanket. And the only time in all of the Peanuts comic strips, all of the specials, that he ever lets go of that blanket is when he says, "Fear not." He lets go of that blanket. He's not afraid. "I bring to you good news of great joy, which will be for all the people. For today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is Christ the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Suddenly, a great company of the heavenly hosts appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to men." I'm reading the NIV. It says, "in whom his favor rests." The King James says, "peace on earth and goodwill to men." When the angels had left them and gone into the heavens, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." And when he gets done reading this, Linus says, "That's what Christmas is all about, Charlie Brown." See, it's not about us declaring, like, "Hey, we're gonna get along now because Jesus came." A lot of times at Christmas, and this has happened. I think sometimes we talk a lot about like a war on Christmas in our culture and stuff like that, which, whatever. Here's the thing. This was written in 1863. And Longfellow saw this disconnect between what we talk about at Christmas time and the world around him. It is no different today. You know, we'll sing songs all the time about how, like, this is a season of love and of peace and of hope and all these things. But separated from Jesus, that's all not true. See, what Jesus came to do was not to give us peace and to give us goodwill towards one another on our own accord. The peace he came to bring us was peace with God. The goodwill was from God to men. It was not based on human endeavors. It is centered instead in the work of God through Jesus. And devoid of that, the message of Christmas is empty. You can ring all the church bells you want. You can sing all the fa-la-la-la-las you want. You can sing all the Christian-based carols you want. But unless it's based in that who that baby in that manger actually was and what he actually came to do, then the message is empty. Longfellow saw that disconnection. That human endeavor towards peace and goodwill would fail. And yet the message kept ringing out. It didn't stop because of our failure. Because the message of Christmas, the hope of Christmas, the peace of Christmas, the joy that comes with Christmas, the love that we experience at Christmas is based in who Jesus is and what he has done, not in us. It is why in the midst of turmoil and strife we can still say there is peace on earth and there is goodwill towards men. We might not have peace with one another, but we have peace with God. We might not have goodwill towards one another, but God has goodwill towards us. And then as those who have experienced that peace and that goodwill, we proclaim that message to others and say, God has come in the person of Jesus so that you might have peace with him. He wants good for you. And as God works that in you and he works that in me, this miraculous thing happens. When I have peace with God and you have peace with God, we can have peace with one another. When I find out that God is for me and not against me, and you find out that God is for you and not against you, it changes how we see the people around us. See, the solution isn't empty platitudes. The solution is transformation through this relationship that Jesus offers us. I keep saying this every week because it's still true, and we need to really, this needs to be the focus of Christmas for us. God loved us so much that he sent his son to not leave us in our destitution, not in our sin, to deal with the brokenness inside of us so we could have a right relationship with him and so that we could have a right relationship with one another. When Longfellow wrote this song, he saw the disconnection, but then he resolves the song by saying, the message still stands. The failure is not on God's part, it's on our part. The message of the angels was that the Savior has come to right the wrongs. And God is still alive and well. Though it might not feel like it, he's still alive and well. He's still at work. Our hope is in God at work in the world through Jesus. And Christmas is one of those times that we set aside to remember God coming into the world to do that work. but also God is at work in the world through us, as the Holy Spirit lives in us if we know Christ. If we have a relationship, if we have that peace with God that the angels proclaimed, then his Spirit comes in, lives in us, and God works through us too. He's at work in the world through us as well. So every year as we celebrate Christmas, we, like the bells Longfellow heard, are supposed to ring out the message of the hope found in Jesus. Regardless of what's going on in the world around us. In fact, the more turmoil and strife that's going on in the world around us, the more the world needs to hear that truth. So here's our so what. The message of Christmas is that Jesus is the hope that the world needs. Do we live in his hope? Do we live in the truth that Jesus comes to bring us peace? That Jesus shows us that God is for us and not against us? That it means that God is at work in us? And do we proclaim it? Last week we talked about the song, Hark the Herald Angels Sing, and I said, we're supposed to be like the angels, right? Well, this week I'm going to say we're supposed to be like those church bells. Ringing the message loud and clear, even when, in fact, especially when it doesn't make sense to the world around us. This is our meditation verse for this week. I put it in the King James to reflect the words of the song that we're going to sing in a few minutes. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace and goodwill towards men.